I'll start off. We'll introduce ourselves. My name is John Hancock. Been collecting 20 years. What else to say? 21 U.S. complete collections, and I'm up here with fellow collectors and friends.
I'm John Rose. Ironically enough, we met grabbing for the same Genesis game in a Goodwill bin about, what, 10, 15 years ago?
15 years ago.
Yeah, so I'm more of a, I guess I'm more of a player than a collector, so I'm not about complete sets. I'm really into, you know, shoot 'em ups, shmups, that kind of thing, platformers, that kind of stuff.
I'm Brian Lawhorn. I mainly collect PC games, sort of mid-90s, late 90s kind of titles, which here at the show hasn't been so successful, but I sort of, pick them up in the wild, and I try to play as much as I can, but with a lot of the early 90s stuff, it's hard. I need to build, a classic PC to run this kind of stuff, so it's been an interesting process.
My name's Chris Fanner. I started collecting pretty hardcore when I was 14, 28 now. Decided when I was 14 I wanted every Super Nintendo game ever made. A couple years ago I completed that goal. Right now I'm working on Game Boy.
So we're very different collectors. We're also friends. I thought it'd be interesting to have a panel on just kind of perspectives, pros and cons of collecting, and pitfalls to avoid. And so we'll all collect for different reasons. For me, I'm very big on archival, historic perspective. I am one day wanting to have a museum. It has to be the right museum and the right reason to have it. So I'm looking forward to, hopefully within the next 20 years, have some part of my collection part of a Northwest museum.
And for me, gaming to me, I mean, it's all about playing the games. I want all the, when I was a kid, my family didn't have a whole lot of money, so I unfortunately was neighbors with this rich kid who got everything for free, like every 20 minutes. And so when I grew up and I got, disposable income, it's like, hey, I can go buy all that stuff too. And so now for me, it's more about, it's about people, it's about friends. Like I've got a pretty big collection, and it's really all about, I've met a large number of my close friends through the gaming community, through playing games, ran into Hancock, we hit it off, and then, through doing the shows and stuff over the years and stuff. I mean, this large network of people, have a lot of fun memories, everybody getting together and gaming. So for me, it's kind of more of a sitting down with friends, playing kind of a thing, and then having, everything that's cool to do that with.
And for me, it's mostly about sort of going, I guess you'd call it, into the wild and finding video games. Because I've had my hands on a lot of rare games that people go, oh man, it's great for your collection, in terms of non-PC stuff that I've just, I've either sold to stores or other people that I know that I would rather play this game than I would. So it's just, for me, it's all about, finding stuff.
For me, it's a lot about nostalgia. I grew up collecting X-Men cards and comic books. I remember around the age of 14, I kept on plugging in my Super Nintendo at parties, even though 64 and GameCube was kind of the hot thing. But I just liked playing Bomberman and Turtles in Time. And when I found out you couldn't buy the games in stores anymore, I got the thrill of going to pawn shops and thrift stores, just trying to find the games. It was exciting to me. And then I started meeting people. And it just was kind of fulfilling that childhood dream of, one day maybe I could own the whole row that said Blockbuster, and found out that those games were really cheap. Nobody cared about them anymore. It just became really exciting to hunt and to meet, such great people. They were also interested in the hobby. It was like collecting X-Men cards, but a lot better.
Yeah, that's part of it for me. Is I collected other things before I got into the hobby, and really games really just kind of stuck with me. I did comics, I did cards, and I can agree with that. And then, and I think what we're talking about is that there's a lot of different ways of collecting and why you collect them. There's not just one way. And there's many different reasons why people get into this hobby. There's many different reasons why people came here today, and that there's many of them are fine. Now we're going to talk about space. It always comes up, and space is the big issue with collecting, especially with rent being expensive, especially in Portland. We all handle space different ways. For me, I'm out of space, and I've been out of space for a long time, and so half my collection's in paper boxes, but it's tough. It takes space, it takes money, and so I affordably just try to store it, what I can't present, and hoping that one day it'll be open to the public, which is my goal.
I think too, a lot of it is, for me, like I have kind of the opposite thing. Getting involved with the show, you know, when you're one of the organizers and at the end of the show, there's this really funny thing, like after 2 days, nobody wants to haul anything home and they just kind of throw it at you when you're leaving. So I ended up with like all this stuff that I really wasn't interested in playing so much, but it was cool, you know, it was free. And then I moved about 1.5 years ago and ended up with an entire truckload of extra stuff. And it was like kind of one of those things where it was like, you know, why do I have all this stuff? It's just starting to become a burden, and so I've progressively sold all that stuff off. And so for me, I kind of pared my collection down to all of the systems in the games that I really enjoyed playing, I really enjoyed sharing with other people. And like John was saying, you get a lot of different perspectives in the community, and there's a lot of people who say there's this one right way to collect, and you have to be complete, and it has to be in the box. And in reality, what this is about, it should always be about fun. You know, this should be something you enjoy doing, and if you let it turn into something that becomes a compulsion or something that you have to do, or you're unhappy because you can't get this in a box, or you have to spend $3,000 on the rarest game for a set or whatever, you kind of miss the point. I think a lot of times in that games are really about fun, and I think you need to at least for me, it really became easy to lose sight of that, and so I had to kind of pare things down.
And going for PC collecting is probably the most difficult in terms of space, just because a regular PC box is going to take up 4 or 5 or even 10 times the space of even a Super Nintendo game. So for me, finding space has been incredibly difficult. So I try to put out, in terms of the things that I really love, out on a bookshelf or something, so that it's out there. But a lot of the stuff I end up just, which is kind of a shame, just putting some of it in crates in storage for that time that I have a house or something I can display all of them. So it's, for PC, it's really difficult to find the space, which is also why, here on the show floor, finding that kind of thing has also been difficult, because people would rather put out a crate of 100 NES games rather than 4-box PC games or something like that.
Yeah, I heard a statistic one time that the average person is going to move about 15 times in their life. Obviously, you move a lot more when you're younger, but just need to think about that. I have 4 arcade machines that have been in a buddy's house for 2 years, so they're not really my arcade machines now, are they? The thing is one day your landlord may tell you that you need to move, and you need to think about, hey, I'm young, I'm probably going to move around a lot. How often do I really want to move this stuff? How often do I want to pack it and take care of it? We all want to enjoy collecting. You just need to be realistic about what your life is going to be like. When you buy something and you spend money on it, you need to think about, am I going to move this with me for the next 50, 60 years of my life? Just be honest with yourself, and that's why, keep the things that are important to you and nostalgic to you, close. And when you're thinking about those really big items or those really expensive items, those massive collections, just really think about the long term, whether you're going to be able to enjoy it and whether you're going to be able to move it.
So it's basically why you started collecting Game Boy then, because it's the smallest available one you have.
That's why I'm on Game & Watch right now, so it's like tiny. Yeah. Next couple of things is about the importance of having fellowship with other collectors, and the bringing up the fact that many of my friends up here have found or have downsized or given me a heads up on good deals, or someone's throwing this out you might be interested in. I had several collectors come up to me and, oh, this person's getting rid of this, and picked it up for me and brought it to me. And so if you're wanting to downsize, or if you're wanting to trade something, find a good home for it versus throwing it away. You'd be surprised. I know Portland's really big on recycling, and in a way, retro collecting is a form of recycling. You're keeping electronics that could potentially be hazardous in the ground in a collection somewhere, and it's actually kind of like mild recycling, in my opinion. And it's a good thing. I've had several things that were going to be thrown out in the garbage. In fact, the best story I have is I got about half my N64 box collection, all the boxes, because a video store was going to throw them away in the garbage. So just think of that. There's several things that are just thrown out all the time that can be put into, so someone would be appreciative of it.
And it's something that I do a lot of, is like when I go to Goodwills or thrift stores or something like that, I'll find other items that I'm not particularly looking for, but I always tend to, if they're priced right, pick them up and sort of. I know a lot of collectors and stores that are in the area that would love to have this item, and for me, I would rather find something that I would really want rather than just here's this copy of this game that you're like, I don't really collect Super Nintendo or Nintendo 64 or something like that. I'd rather have a game for a system that I cared about.
Yeah, and I've hardly heard of a collector that doesn't resell eventually. That's to say not to resell for profit, but also to trade with other collectors that you know. You're going to see things that you know are good and valuable that you can trade to another person, especially if you know what they're looking for. So if you see things that maybe aren't necessarily up your alley, if you start to get more friends that collect, you'll know, oh, I should get this PC game because you might be interested in it. And then the next time you see a Game Boy game, he knows to maybe come to me. And so, that's a way that you can kind of get value, you can get money so that you can ultimately build up your collection.
And that networking really does, a lot of times, enable you to do or collect or get things that you would never normally be able to afford. Like, I'll use an example that we did. John had a pretty good TurboGrafx set, and through this absolutely crazy Craigslist score, it was just ridiculous. Like, he basically ran into a guy that had almost a complete cart set for TurboGrafx. But, it was several $100s, and he didn't have it, but he knew that I was really getting into 16-bit. So he picks up the phone, he's like, hey, I really need these 10 games out of a set, but, there's other 90 games in the set. He's like, I'll hook you up for this amount. And so, like, because of that, I picked up the ones, and I got this, basically a 3/4 of the set in one fell swoop. He got the games that he needed, and, we've done that, like, what, 20, 30 times over the years?
Yeah,
easily.
The other thing is, he went to a video store, and they were going to throw out 400 Sega Genesis manuals and spine artwork. And they just gave it to him in a box. And he just came up to me with this box and said, here you go. And that's still part of, there's probably at least 200 part of those, part of my collection. So thank you. So, as I said before, these are all my friends. And 3 years ago, I don't know if everybody here knows that me and Rose were actually on the organizational board for Retro Gaming Expo. And in 2011, we both stepped down with Corey Strite, and because of time, we all were out of town. I live in Long Beach, Washington. He lives in California, and we do the Cowlitz Gamers for Kids show now. And really, I wanted to kind of get to the point where I was getting so into the organizational part and having 2 jobs and stress, I wasn't playing crap. I mean, I was like collecting and I wasn't playing, and on top of feeling guilty and mad, I was just not having fun. And it was the best thing for me personally, it was just because of time. I stepped down, formed the Cowlitz Gamers Club, which is going on 3 years, and which everybody here goes to them. And what we do is we do a monthly meeting, and we do like a theme gaming. So what are some of the themes that we've done?
Schwab's, I think we did a couple of that arcade that shut down in Kelso.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done obscure consoles, like just brought in, Odyssey 2, 3DO, CDI. One time it was just winter themed, just games that involve snow levels.
Anything else?
We did a ninja themed one. Obviously, you have to have a ninja theme.
Oh, of course, ninjas make everything better. So, yeah, we've done a lot of fun things. We have like kind of tradition. He usually plays me in a sports game and I lose, also known as Bill Lemere's Combat Basketball. Combat Basketball. We play NES Ice Hockey, Tecmo Bowl. If it's Madden, I sometimes win, but just keeping it real, keeping it fresh, rejuvenating you why you do it, playing it or having fun. You don't have to play something to collect it and enjoy it, but just appreciate it. You could be displaying it or having fun with it, or I don't know. What are some ways you guys keep it fresh?
Well, one thing I'll say is that do whatever you can to find gamer community. This is really important. I grew up in Alaska. I was collecting at a really young age. I didn't know a single person for probably about 4 years that was collecting. In my mind, there were about 100 people on the digital press boards in the country that were collecting retro games. Now, obviously that was wrong, but it's weird to be very into a hobby and not ever meet a single other person that is into it. I was the only person, so I wasn't able to share it with anyone. And once I moved down to Oregon and started meeting other people, and I was able to talk to them about you know, these niche games and things that I was into, it just made me enjoy the hobby so much more. I couldn't even tell you, just to be able to have those kind of conversations about things that you found or games that you like, you know, hidden gems that you know about. It made me love the hobby in a way I couldn't ever have imagined. But that's the thing, is to do what you can to find gamer community. Maybe there isn't a local retro gamer club in your town, but you know, do some research. Maybe there is. Maybe you can start one, even if you only, you know, get together with 2 or 3 friends. If you, you know, make that happen for yourself and you seek it out and you tell yourself, this will happen. I will find friends and I will find new people to enjoy this with. You're going to enjoy it so much more. I mean, just absolutely do that, and you know, you're going to get better games, you're going to get good deals, you're going to expand your knowledge set, and you're going to love retro gaming. So do whatever you can to find gamer community.
And I had a very similar experience. I started off as a kid. The Atari 2600 was the first console I had. My mom lucked out on a fire sale, basically, and back when they were still going for like $200. She lucked into this fire sale and got us a console and like 40 games for Christmas, which was, for, you know, a poor kid whose dad was a teacher, it was like, you know, the best Christmas ever. And so what I found is when the NES came along, my grandma would go pick up random NES games from the movie clearance bins for like $5, and they almost always sucked. You know, it was like the really, really bad NES games that nobody was renting. But I found the exchange rate at my school was about 20 Atari games for 1 NES card. So I started collecting Atari games, and then over time, you know, you'd find this, what the heck's this weird? Oh, it's an Intellivision. That's pretty cool. I'm going to start collecting that. So I had a few consoles, and then Hancock and I met. And then he moved up here and kind of got networked with the gamer community up in the Portland area. And I came up and was like, wow, there's all these like really cool people who do this exact same thing that I do, and it's really fun. And wow, they have a lot of stuff that they sell much cheaper than eBay, so that's cool, you know. And then the next thing you know, I come up here, you know, what, twice a year now. Most of my vacation time is up here just so I can hang out with my friends. I'm going to be moving up here. All of that is because I came up here and got involved with a bunch of gamers and ended up becoming friends with a bunch of people. You know, I met my current girlfriend at a game show. I mean, so it's really, you know, I think games in general, you know, there's this stereotype that anybody who collects games, and you guys I'm sure have all dealt with this, you know, you live in your mom's basement and have no friends and all that stuff. Well, that's crap. You know, I've had the exact opposite experience, and I think most of us have too, is that, you know, I've actually probably met, I'd say, a good 75% of my close personal friends through the gaming community. So just like Chris said, you know, that's, if you're not doing it already, make an effort to connect, because you won't regret it. You know, you'll have a lot more fun too.
Yeah, have some pride in collecting. You know, I've had even my own roommate right now. He was just like, "This is really weird. It's really weird that you do this. It's kind of a weird hobby. You know, this doesn't seem healthy. You know, stuff like that." And I remember looking to him and, you know, saying, I've met people that wish me happy birthday on my birthday. Like, I've met such good friends. I go up to Cowlitz and I game with these guys once a month.
It's awesome.
You know, I collect games and I enjoy them. I meet other people. You know, and I looked at my roommate and I said, "You're a smoker. You know, you spend the same amount of money that I do on video games on something that is not healthy for you. And you're accusing me of this being like kind of weird and unhealthy." You know, it's like, I spend 40, 50 bucks a week on games. You spend 40, 50 bucks a week on cigarettes. Which do you think is healthier? You know, I know all these people, like I've met them, you know, they wish me happy birthday. This is totally a normal hobby. People want to tell you you're a nerd or something, you look them right in the face and say, that's crap. You know, like, this is an awesome hobby. This is healthy, you know. This is fun. I know people, you know. Have some pride. It's cool. This is a cool hobby.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, I just, those are the really healthy things, and I think that there is some pitfalls in collecting that can be potentially harmful. And it's things that we talked about before, at least I have in my previous presentations, but it's important that we talk about them. And you know, the one thing I've spoke about in Seattle and Vancouver, BC, is balance. You know, it's very, very important. You can overdo collecting, and it doesn't have to be just games. A lot of people see my collection and they have all these stereotypes about me. You must be rich or a hoarder, and you know, it's not true. You know, I do have quite a bit of balance. You know, I'm married. You know, I don't live in my mom's basement. I have 2 kids. I balance this with 2 other jobs. I make time for my family. I've been married going on 13 years, I think. And you know, I've been with my wife almost 15, and you know, for me personally, I have to have balance, because if I don't have balance, then things get out of hand and stuff. And so the rule is, if it doesn't stay in the garage and it doesn't eventually get there, then I can't keep it. So that's my rule. So it's things stay in the garage. That's my rule of thumb.
It's not a garage, it's a, like,
Oh.
super game room.
Yeah, super game room that working on a small expansion. So.
And he's a perfect example of what persistence will get you. When we met, his game collection consisted of about 300 Nintendo games and a bunch of Star Wars figures. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. we got
Now, what are you up to? 7,000, 8,000 games, 300 consoles?
8,000.
Yeah.
I just completed my Virtual Boy collection at the show with getting Jack Brothers involved.
This guy did this by basically going to Goodwill on his lunch breaks and buying everything that wasn't nailed down that he knew he could make some kind of profit, and flipping it. He'd make $5, $10, whatever. You know, every once in a while he'd get some crazy score and get like some rare prototype Atari 2600 game that he dropped, you know, get like $2,000 on or something. But
That did happen.
he knows, he meticulously tracks everything, and you know, if he knew it was worth something, he would get it, and then he would find another collector online and trade, swap. I mean, and so, you know, you fast forward 15 years and you do that and you stay focused and you get where he's at. Now, I'm lazy when it comes to collecting. I'm a perfect example of what you can be if you're lazy. I've got about, I don't know, maybe 1,500 now. You know, I've got a lot. I've got, you know, I collect a lot of like the Atari era stuff and a lot of the 16-bit era, you know, TurboGrafx, you know. I've got pretty much everything I ever want to play. And generally what happens is I come here, I go to one of these big shows, it kicks the nerd gears into overdrive, I end up spending too much money, get a bunch of stuff. And I do that 2 or 3 times a year, and then, you know, I've got a bunch of other hobbies. I forget to even check eBay or the forums for months at a time. But, you know, and we've been collecting roughly about the same amount of time, and it really just is kind of what you want to do with it, I think, when it comes down to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he's friends
It's
with
that
me.
balance thing, yeah.
He's friends with me. Hey, what's cool? Check this out. Cool. All right, into it.
Yeah, especially if you have a lot of games. You know, I have a couple thousand. That's probably too much. You got to think about, okay, if I were to play each game for an hour a day, and just one game a day, take me over 5 years to play them all. So maybe a little too much, but you just really need to think about that, because new games are coming out almost every day that I'm also interested in, and there's, you know, still some old games that I'm trying to find. But it's about finding balance. You know, if you find yourself like looking at something and you're like, oh yeah, Sega Pico, which is like a system made for little kids, and you're like, oh well, it's Sega, it's going to be really cool. You know, there could be, yeah, there could be that kind of little pull of just that kind of collector mentality of, oh well, it's Sega, you know, I got to have it. You really need to think about, am I going to play it? Am I going to enjoy it? Is this going to keep me from enjoying other aspects of my collection, other games that I already have? So when you're looking at that thing, don't buy it like, oh, well, it's canon. It's part of the series. I know it's not very good, but it's, you know, it's part of the series. Like, unless you have a really specific set in mind, think about what you're ultimately going to do with it. I talked to a vendor today because he has an original Odyssey, which is the very first home video game system ever. But it's not very much fun to play. And I thought, oh, that's such a cool collector's item. It's a couple $100, you know, I blow all my money, but it would be cool to have. And he actually talked himself out of a sale. He looked at me and he said, my advice is don't get it. You know, granted, I know him a little bit, but he said, you will look at it, you'll maybe plug it in once, and you will absolutely never play it. And I'm telling you that because that's exactly what I did with it. He said, you know, you got a couple $100s to spend, go out and get some games that you really want to play. Yeah, this is an extremely cool collector's item. It is the first home video game system console ever, but you're not going to do anything with it. You got a couple $100, buy some games that you really like. So, you know, if you're looking at that one game that's really expensive and really obscure, that's not that good, but it's part of the series, like unless you have this really specific set in mind, you know, I think that's really good advice. Buy something that you're really going to like and enjoy. There's a lot of great games out there that are super cheap. You know, there's a lot of other great games that you're actually going to play. I would say prioritize those.
And I would certainly have to agree with that. I do play a lot of modern games more than I do my retro collection, unfortunately. But it's one of those things where I would love to find, you know, sort of cut back with my modern games, play the games that I've purchased, you know, retro games like PC stuff. Obviously, I have a bit of, you know, work to do to get a computer running to run most of them, but it's a matter of, just putting some time in and sort of just going back and realize, I bought this for a reason, and I hope that reason's not just, hey, this was $1 and it was, really cheap. I just want to, sort of go through what I have and what I've already purchased and sort of just appreciate it. A lot of the games that I have at least a little bit of a tie to from the past. Like I've picked up, Diablos and Fallouts and games that are, still have current series, but, I played these games when I was younger, and I would, I have a tie to it. So it's sort of balancing, finding all these cool games and then realizing, I don't have a tie to this. I don't really care about this $200 game that I never played as a kid, never saw as a kid. It's sort of a nostalgia thing. And, I would be much happier to see somebody who either wants it for a full set or wants it for even just a play. And so it's sort of, for me, that's the kind of balance I'm working towards, is finding a way to play the classic games that I have, as well as keeping on track with the few modern games that I do also play.
I think that going back to what I was saying about balance, like I have time limits, I have money limits. I bring X amount of money to a show or make X amount of money at a show, and that's what I spend. And that's different for everybody. Everybody needs, it's a very important thing to bring up, because one thing that people can really get in trouble with is money. And I think getting back, you don't have to get everything. You don't have to get everything now. Collect for different reasons, but if you only have $100, stick to $100. There is so many deals at this show, especially this year. Oh my gosh, this is the craziest year for me. Amount of product at this show. But, setting your limits, whether setting your limits on consuming your time to balance it with your job and with your partner or job or whatever, or financially, spending X amount to where it doesn't get you into financial trouble, because it really is not worth getting into debt over. It really isn't. I've seen it financially ruin some people, and it's not fun. Just keeping it on a budget. And there's so many different ways you can do that. I knew a friend that him and his buddy, they would go in on a game. And so they would share games. And so they would like, okay, you got the Atari this week, I get the Atari next week, or we'll split games and stuff, and then kept it affordable. It's pretty awesome.
And that's a lot of what I did, sort of having a minimum wage job. I didn't have a whole lot of money to go out and buy a $30 or $40 game. So a lot of it, what I did with the PC items specifically, is I would find the smaller items that I could easily ship rather than those huge boxes. And I would find the ones that are worth $30. I would sell it on eBay or sell it on Amazon, just so I can go out and find the one game that I really wanted. Sort of self-fund yourself in terms of selling games to buy the games you really like.
And see, I'm like very different when it comes to how I've gotten my stuff. I absolutely loathe selling things on eBay. I hate reselling. I hate going to thrift shops. The town that I live in, the places you can go to get stuff are really, really far apart. So you waste a ton of gas trying to get to everywhere. And it got to the point where it just really annoyed me. So what I started doing is I figured out, through networking and stuff, through some of these shows and friends, I figured out that there were some certain people and places that I could go to and get my best bang for the buck. And so I would just save up a little money, and instead of flipping things like they did, I would just, I'd save up, it'd be my vacation, I'd be like, okay, this year I can swing, $300. And then I would go to the convention and make that go as far as possible. But I only did that, maybe 3 times a year. And so for me, it worked. You can do it different ways. It really just depends if you're, if you like the eBay thing, if you like the reselling thing. And for me, a lot of times I'd buy sets of things and then I just trade it with my friends for a thing or two that I wanted. And, so you don't have to, it doesn't have to be, if you're someone who's good at that like John is, where he's very meticulous and tracks everything and organizes and sells things online, you could really, really make some crazy scores doing that. Or you can be lazy like me and just do it when you feel like it, a couple times a year. And, there's no one right way of doing it.
Yeah, there's a term I learned that I really like. It's called opportunity cost. And that is, if you spend money, you're not just losing the money, you're also losing any opportunities that that money could otherwise afford. So the idea is, if I were to spend $200 on an Odyssey that I would ultimately not play, I could spend that $200 and I could go to Crater Lake. And Crater Lake is beautiful, and I would probably remember that trip for the rest of my life. If I bought the Odyssey and put it on my shelf, I don't really think that would equate to the opportunity of an amazing trip. So you need to think about that kind of thing when you're spending money. Even if you are spending money, even if you can't, it's disposable income. Just think about the other opportunities that money could ultimately afford. If buying a game is really going to make you happy, by all means, especially coming from me, do it. You know, get the game if it makes you happy. But also just think about what that money could otherwise provide. If you're really thinking about how your life could be improved outside of gaming, and thinking about that, that'll really dictate your spending. So don't just think about the money itself. Just also think about the other kind of opportunities, that money could ultimately afford. And I think you'll find you have a more consolidated effort when it comes to collecting, and you will be happier.
And use it in a lot of ways, like, I think disposable income is a term that we all throw around a lot in terms of collecting. And look at it this way, I mean, going to Crater Lake, for example, that's an experience. It's something you're going to remember. And if you're going to spend money on gaming, and you're going to spend money on collecting, that's why we keep talking about the importance of networking, is when the experience of starting, because I started when this was still NWCG, it was like, maybe 200 people in a weekend.
Yeah, maybe.
Seeing that go from this little garage indie thing to that's an experience I will never forget. The fact that, I've been involved in this convention, it's maybe, one of the biggest classic gaming expos in the United States, and knowing the people over as well, meeting a bunch of, the people who program the games and the systems and stuff that I grew up with, and actually having dinner with them after the show and different stuff. I mean, you can't trade those experiences, and like, I couldn't tell you some of the rare games I've picked up here over the years. I've sold some of them. Heck, some of them are sitting in my closet and I haven't seen them in 5 years. Those are experiences I remember. The friendships I've formed, I remember. And so remember when you're spending that money on the games that you're also doing it for experiences, not just to fill a set.
And I stopped pretty much selling online in 2010, and I came up with a creative way of kind of funding my hobby, and it was, I felt like I had this large collection, well, how can I give back to the community? And so I made an instructional videos on how to collect, and I've sold over 500 of them over 5 years, and it's a 7-disc DVD set that I sell, and I use that to occasionally get a game for my collection, or I save up to get what I'm missing. This last year, I worked with Jason Santucci online, and for this show, I did a limited run game panel. I have one left. 43 copies of a homebrew. It's a parody of my own gamer. Now that's pretty creative. I thought about this, but the long story short, this funded my entire gaming experience out there. I didn't go into debt. I split proceeds with the programmer, and that's pretty much how I funded today's earnings. Now, is it a lot of work? Heck yes. A lot of people would be like, that's way too much work. Because I worked with like 6 different peoples to put this together. But for me, it was worth it because I didn't have to borrow from savings. And I found a rare game I was looking for like 4 years. And so, feel free to talk to me about this stuff afterwards. But we're going to open it up unless anybody else has something to say for questions, Q&A time, and then we'll be done. So, anybody have any questions for any of us?
Well, I got an N64 like a couple of months ago.
Okay.
And I since decided I want to try and get every N64 game that was ever made. I was just wondering, how would I, since I'm 17, and I don't really have disposable income at the moment.
Okay.
So, I'm trying to make some money, mowing lawns and stuff, but
Awesome.
yeah.
That's how I earned my Genesis.
So, I was just wondering, like, for the rarer titles that are a lot more expensive, how would someone, just save up or, network or what?
Oh yeah, so
Trades.
so trades, look for opportunities. If you find a cheap game and it's more valuable, pick it up and then trade that for the game that you're needing, or buying doubles, looking for opportunities, networking. Getting on the forums like Nintendo Age, especially if you're getting into Nintendo, establish yourself, get a seller rating, and then go from there to start networking to get what you want. Having a limit, and just being patient. The biggest pitfall I see people going for complete sets. Is I'm going for this complete set, and I want to complete it within 2 years, because you'll burn out. You'll burn out, you'll die, because it may take you 5 years. You know how long my Sega Genesis collection took? It took 13 years.
Almost the entire time I've known him,
Yeah.
he's been collecting.
And it wasn't about collecting the set, it's because I enjoyed doing it. When you start focusing on getting a complete set, and it can become an obsession. For me, it was more of a pastime and a hobby, so balancing that and not putting a time limit on it, because when you put a time limit on it, you're dead. Like, you'll just burn out.
And yeah, just don't be in a hurry. And to give you an example, like when I was 17, I was collecting the Atari 2600. That's kind of how I got started. Same thing, you know, you'd scrounge up $10 from your dad from pizza money, or, you know, from mowing lawns or whatever. I never thought I'd get anywhere. Well, that was when I was 17. I now have, I think, over 850 Atari 2600 games, you know, and if you're not in a hurry, you know, you're like, oh, I'll never get those rare games. And then you wander in, you go into a thrift store 20 years later, and it's like, oh, well, that guy obviously doesn't know that's worth, you know, $100, and he's charged $2 for it, so yeah, there we go. Or, you know, you trade it to someone. Just don't be in a hurry, have fun with it, and eventually, if you really care enough about it and want it, you'll get definitely within spitting distance. Just don't be in a hurry.
And I was going at one point for a complete Dreamcast collection, and so I sort of got halfway into it, and I realized this whole, looking at the whole set as in terms of just the games that were available, it's like half these games I would look at and go, I don't really care for that, or that game wasn't that good, so maybe, you know, I guess just, if you're looking for Nintendo games, you know, N64 games, maybe, you know, start out with the games you like. Start out with the games that you go, yeah, you know, like Super Smash Bros. One of my favorite games for the 64. So start with the stuff that you want, and then if you like it and you're going to keep going, then go for the other games as well.
And don't focus on necessarily having a complete set. There's this thing in the community that you have to have a complete set. You don't have to have a complete set. Like, for example, he has every Sega Genesis game ever made with a manual. I mean, and I'm not kidding you, it's from where that camera is to the wall over here. I mean, it's gigantic. Just this one entire wall of his game is Genesis games. And now, about
It's gotta be alphabetical.
Well, it's frustrating because it's color coordinating, it looks terrible. But I can't find anything when it looks pretty,
Yeah.
so I'll take ugly and able to find something over pretty.
And the thing is, it's about 2/3 of that is EA Sports games. You know. So, like for me, for example, I've got about 200 Genesis games. It's all the rare stuff, all the really hard to find stuff, all the really fun stuff, like basically everything that I want to play. And I have no desire to, you know, go track down 500 versions of Madden. You know, that doesn't matter to me. But that's two different styles. He wants a complete set. I want the stuff I want to play. You know, you make what you want out of your collection. And don't let anyone tell you that what you have is not okay because you're missing something.
Correct.
I have one other question, Hancock. Has anyone ever told you that you look like Al Borland?
Oh, I hear it all the time. I hear it all the time with the OxyClean guy, Billy Mays.
And don't make jokes about the Declaration of Independence, please. He gets angry. It's
It comes with the territory.
How did it feel when Nick Cage stole your document?
Nice. Yeah, no, and the thing is we've all complimented one another. Like, Rose came over to my house, and because I had an extensive collection, he was able to pick out what he wanted to collect. And so that's kind of what inspired me to like share my collection on video. And then, you know, when I'm done making the videos, I do want to dump them on YouTube maybe down the road. But again, it's educating, getting informed out there. And there's many different ways of doing that. You can hunt, you can go on YouTube. There's many different ways of that. But informing yourself before you make a purchase is really important this time. The nice thing about shows is you can test it, you can touch it. You know, sometimes they're even fine with going to the TV and making sure it's okay, or watching a YouTube video on gameplay or something, like going on Twitch or something as well, seeing what a game is like.
In your hunt for the set, I would also say you have two assets that a lot of other people don't have that you can use to leverage to make money. And that is, you have time and you have knowledge. So if you have time, you can get up and go to garage sales, and maybe you're into 64, but you see Super Nintendo. Super Nintendo's pretty hot. You can buy that, and then you can flip it and make more money to buy 64. You can also use your knowledge set to get money. I remember buying a Super Nintendo with a bunch of games, and I only needed one of them for $70, but one of the games I saw on the Craigslist ad was Kirby's Dream Land 3, and it's only because I knew that that was a game I needed and it was worth money that I saw that, and I was able to keep the game, sell everything else for $70. I essentially got that game for free because I had the knowledge and because I had the time to look on Craigslist and to go to that person's house. So you can use that. I would also say don't be scared of buying big sets, even if you have a lot of the other games already, because you can find you can keep the few games that you need from that set and probably flip that whole set, and you will ultimately get them for free. Yes, it will take you a little time, but you can essentially pull money and games out of thin air doing that, and we've all done it.
Oh, yes.
The other piece of advice I have is don't be scared to tell other people that you're into games, because I know something that all of us has happened is we always have these friends, like coworkers, maybe even people you don't know very well, that come by and they're like, you're the game guy, right? Well, I got like this box of 64 stuff in my basement that I don't really care about. You can just have it. Like my buddy Rob got Evo, you know, in a box of Super Nintendo stuff from that, because his girlfriend's friend was like, oh, just have this. I don't even care. And that has happened so many times to all of us. So just let other people know, and like you'll be surprised. But yeah, don't give yourself a time limit, but you do all those things, man, it's gonna happen.
One more thing, don't get tunnel vision on when you're collecting. Like I'm a perfect example. I only collect a few things, you know, and there's tons of stuff that's out there. I don't care anything about it. But I learned what the rare, hard to find, sought after stuff was. And I'll give you an example. I was in, I think it was Salvation Army. I found Guardian Heroes and a couple of the Mega Man games for the Saturn, which I could care, I don't care. He, on the other hand, flipped out when I called him, and I got a huge number of rare and television games that I really wanted because we just traded straight across. So don't get tunnel vision, find out what everybody else is looking for, and keep an eye out for that stuff too.
And this will teach you. No,
Anybody else have questions? Yeah.
I got a couple questions just to go back and further on your thing and like, you know, what he said about telling your friends and stuff about it. I actually have a buddy of mine who's actually going to give me a bunch of old PlayStation 1 games, so it does help out to actually talk to other people about that. I actually have two questions. The first one is particularly to John. For complete in box games, how do you go about going after them? Do you mainly go after through trades, or do you mainly go after, like, you know, trying to find them at Goodwills? How do you go after, like, you know, the boxed items instead of, like, you know, the loose items? Because my goal right now is trying to get complete in box things for all the Nintendo IPs and Mega Man as well. That's kind of like my goal right now.
A lot of piecemealing. A lot of my collection's piecemealing. Sometimes you're buying a box lot, sometimes you're buying a lot, you know, or carts. I've piecemealed a lot of my stuff together. It's the only way I've been able to do it.
Okay.
And so you're going to have to resell extra things to get the money back to get the things that you want. That's the easiest way, because if you buy it straight up individually, you're going to spend a lot of money.
That's what I figured. I've been doing that a little bit. Yeah.
And it's hard, right?
Yeah,
because
it is.
You're going, and the other challenge with what you're doing is you're going for something that's hot, that other people are going for. So my advice, and this is just in general advice, is to go before the wave starts. That's how I got what I got, is because I pioneered a lot of things that nobody gave two craps about. You know, I'm going for greatest hits collection right now, and people are laughing at me. I'm the one laughing because it's inexpensive.
Yep.
You know, and eventually it's going to be worth more. I guarantee it. And as a collection complete, I don't care about the value, but I know the challenge of getting it together. It's over 200 games. I enjoy collecting. I don't do it for the money, but it's going to be more expensive down the road, guarantee it. But do with what you want to, but just know that if you're collecting something that's hot, you're going to pay more.
Yeah, I figured.
You know, and right now, Nintendo,
Yeah.
down 10 years from now, maybe Nintendo will cool down like Atari. Like Atari right now, everybody's selling Atari games for $1. And if it's boxed, maybe $5 if it's common. But Nintendo, you know, some of those games, hundreds of dollars, you know, $50, $65. And so know what trends are too, is something we haven't talked about. Go ahead of the trend, you know, and that way you're going to save money sometimes.
Well, to give you an example of something, like watching him do that, I did that with PlayStation 2. I would just go to GameStop and pick up these, you know, $3 bargain bin things. Well, at the last college show, I just sat on them for a few years, and I could have waited and, you know, made more, but I'm moving, so I'm trying to downsize. And so I put all that on the table, and it was like a feeding frenzy. And, you know, I maybe spent $100 all told. I walked out with like 7, you know, from doing that. So if you watch the current trends, you can, you know, sell and make profits and get the rare stuff.
That's exactly what I'm doing with the Wii, because I think the Wii is, right now, GameStop is just trying to get rid of all
Yep.
of
Yeah.
those
Perfect
games
example.
right
That's
now.
exactly being ahead of the trend. You know, there's a lot of garbage there, but there's a lot of good gems.
There
GameStop
is.
doesn't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah, what I could just remember getting, like, you know, a Boy and His Blob and the Blob for less than $5 at GameStop, and I know those are going to be worth more later.
Any other?
Oh, I'd also say, big mistake not to do is definitely buy now, upgrade later. See a lot of people that are like, I don't want to buy that Wiz cart because I want that complete in the box. That's silly. Get the game now, upgrade it later.
Yep.
You can always look and be like, I don't want to spend, you know, $60 on that Smash Brothers. You know, it's like, well, if you already have the game, you know, you can resell the game for 35, 40 bucks. Then upgrading only costs you like 20 bucks. And you never know when that's going to come along. It's going to be easier for you to pull the trigger on that complete thing when you know you have a loose one that you can, like, you know, sell and get some of your money back.
Yeah.
So don't get like so into the whole complete thing that you're not going to get the game. Like, if it's a good deal, get it, play it, enjoy it. You can always upgrade later, and maybe you'll find you don't even want to do that. But yeah, just don't focus too much on the complete box.
Yeah, I got a Super Nintendo game and used a bit and took the back off and bought a cheap sports game and swapped it out.
I did that with Wild Guns.
Yeah, I mean everybody does it, or most people do it to save money, and that's exactly. I mean, I've had a lot of beater copies in my collection, and then when I find a good upgrade, I'm also friends with Corey Strite, who owns a game store, who lives in my same town, that calls me every day, and hey, I got this in, and he knows exactly what I'm missing. And so again, that goes back to that networking too, of like finding people that know what you're looking for and helping you.
Yeah, and definitely don't avoid a game because it's not in the greatest of shape. Because I deal with that a lot in PCs, and a lot of boxes get crushed because they're large, they don't really have much protection. But if you buy, you know, if you get a rare game that's worth, you know, $70, $80, the box might be beat up, but pick it up. You know, it's just because it's not in the greatest of shape doesn't mean that, you know, it's going to be worth a whole lot less. I mean, you still got to have, if you're going for something that's a complete box, you know, a box is better, you know, a box that's in bad shape is better than no box.
Yeah.
You can also play the condition game off, because generally speaking, game's value plummets, obviously, if it looks like it's been mauled by your dog, or it doesn't work. Well, I've, like, for example, some of the rare 2600 stuff that I have some pretty rare games. I would get on eBay and they'd have a one that looked like somebody's Doberman pinscher had been chewing on it, you know, the label's torn off, it's just hammered. But it would be like $20 for this game that in good shape sells for like, you know, $300, $400. And then, you know, a year later, I'd find one with a nice label that was non-functional, and I'd get that for $20 or $30, and take a screwdriver, open it up, put the one that works in, and suddenly I have a complete working copy with the original parts, and I paid $40 for it.
Thank you, 2600.com.
Yeah, basically.
I have another question, but I'll wait for other people to do it. If anyone else has questions.
Anybody else? Yes.
What would you guys recommend for long-term storage, like in case you're moving to a different state for like 3 or 4 years?
Oh.
And how would you recommend storing your disc-based collection?
I use paper boxes because it's free, and they're square, and they fit nice and neat. You can label them, and they absorb, the actual cardboard can absorb moisture. And the nice thing is that because of the size of them, you're limiting the weight you can put in them, so you're not going to throw your back out.
Nice.
And I don't know why they don't make plastic versions of that fit square, but they're like trapezoid. It's like, come on, I want a square container. And I'm sure like I can go to IKEA and find it somewhere, but it frustrates me. Like I want a paper box, but not paper plastic, you know. But I have a third of my collection in that, just organized, just for that reason, because eventually I do want to have a museum. That's what I'm collecting for now.
Are you talking about those old Xerox boxes from like
Absolutely,
the
I absolutely. If you go, there's a seller out there who's a really good friend. His name's Charles, and he brought all his stuff to sell in paper boxes, and it looks. You can stack them really nice, and it's the way to go. That's my advice, and it's free. You can put a Craigslist ad, which I've done, and even letting coworkers know, hey, I'm looking for paper boxes, and they'll give them to you. You keep it out of the.
Your wife brings them home from work. Your mother
Wonderful
brings them home
wife.
from work.
Wonderful wife. I'm going to put the wonderful one.
Well, I was going to say, tell them how you get them for free. It's because everybody brings them home from work for you now. Because
That's
of
right.
like what Chris said about networking.
And the way I store most of my extra PC stuff is I actually worked in a grocery store for 5 years. So a lot of times we you get produce in plastic crates. A lot of times it ends up getting recycled or thrown away or stuff like that. And I figured they came in different sizes, which is perfect because I could put big box games in the biggest container, and then there's a specific number, which I can't remember right now, that fit CDs perfectly, and they would stack and they would look decent. And so that was the way I store a lot of my extra stuff. So yes.
Just for, not a question, but a comment for those starting out in that. One thing that really worked for me for getting like games and that is helping people move. Especially if you're younger,
That's a great idea.
your friends are all moving out of their parents' house. Maybe they don't game anymore. Like it's a great time in your life where you're choosing what are you going to keep, what are you going to get rid of, or what are you going to leave at your parents' house when you go to college and that. And it's like, just be available for people if they're moving in that. And then I've gotten so much cool stuff that's just being cast off. Not just games, but like just anything, any kinds of stuff.
I had to give up an arcade machine for that. Like when I moved from California here, I had to give up Heavy Barrel arcade cab.
That also works really well when one of your best friends has to move like 300 really heavy boxes of games every time he moves, and you help him and he feels guilty that he made you do it again. You tend to get hooked up. So.
And they'll feed you too.
Totally agree with that.
He had to add to my collection twice. So yeah, it's bigger now, by the way. I'm going to move. Any other questions? Any other comments?
Yeah, go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
So my other question was like, I noticed that you guys got like a collection of gamers for like the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, and then you have one in Seattle. How would you go about like trying to make another one in a different area? Because I'm personally from the Bay Area, and I know my buddy, he was actually telling me like if you can really like have the drive, you can maybe start one in another area. And I was like thinking like, the Bay Area is pretty hard to do it just because I look at the amount of people on Craigslist. People create scripts just to have automatic bots pick out every single Craigslist ad just to send them a message just to pick up everything above the crowd and everything like that. And there's about 10 people that do that.
I have a lot on this. I wrote an article for a magazine on this specific article. So you want to make your own gaming show. Number one, start small, start realistic. We've had several people that want to go big and establish themselves and shot themselves in the foot. So look for a place, look for a coffee house, look for a pizza parlor. Have it at my first Calix Gamers show up in 6 years ago. I had maybe 100 people in the first show. Keep the costs down. Network. Go to game stores. The other thing too is sometimes getting together different game stores and companies together, you have to be neutral. You can't, I'm not going to talk to this guy because he's a jerk.
Yeah.
You just have to be very neutral about it and offer it to everybody, knowing everybody's going to have to play nice at least for 2 days or 1 day. Scout around. You have to advertise. You have to know people. It takes a lot of time and effort. I mean, these guys, especially the show the size is now, they're doing it all year round. Every month, having meetings. And so even at a small Kelso show, it takes about 6 months out of the year to organize it. That's a lot of work. So the other thing to ask yourself is, why do you want to do it? If you're doing it to make money, nope. If you're wanting to do it to spread retro gaming and stuff, you got your work cut out. But I mean, that's space is the number one thing that's going to be a challenge, especially in the Bay Area. So I would go small, even like a restaurant. If they have like a lobby or like a party room, start there. Start at like doing a swap meet. I know up in we got one of the original NWCGE members here who's graciously filming this, and they started a church.
Well, the original thing was maybe like a 40 square foot room in somebody's garage, and it was literally 3 guys just getting together. And this is 20 years ago. And then we moved to a public church that charged us like $100 for a weekend. And then eventually we went to like a Holiday Inn, and they charged, I think, like $800 a weekend. And then you just like John said, you work your way up. Yeah. And if your show is great and the word of mouth is good, people will come. I mean, especially with the internet now, the web, I mean, anything that you advertise on Atari Age or Nintendo Age, you know, if the show is good, it'll build itself. That's what's happening here with Portland.
I definitely encourage it. It's kind of like a band. You got to start off small and build your rapport, and then go from there.
But also a school or a college is a good place to start as well, because they already have a whole system for renting rooms and also for spreading information and flyers. So even if you were to go to a local community college, spread the word. You got a lot of young people, a lot of time. You get 50, 100 people in there, and you're like, hey, we got all these games on free play. Come on down. That's a great place to start. And a lot of the system of the logistics of setting up a show are already kind of built in. So you can start there. If it starts to pick up traction, it'll be a lot easier to move to a bigger venue.
You also have churches, Grange, Elks, Moose. There's definitely sometimes I've even heard of a game show at like a convalescent home. And I know it sounds funny, but there are a lot of folks out there that are willing to offer something, especially youth doing something positive, and are willing to offer space in an area affordably.
Thank you so much.
You had a question?
Yeah, for PC gaming, I don't hear a lot of people talk about getting mods for games. Like there's a ton of mods for Quake, for example, and game patches, especially for games where the company goes out of business or gets bought, the site goes away, and suddenly you can't find these patches. And sometimes, like Heavy Gear 2, it runs kind of crappily, but then you patch it up and you can see farther, and it just looks better. I was just wondering if you had any.
I don't have a lot of insight towards that, but I mean, eventually, there's been a lot of sites that are dedicated to that, but a lot of them sort of slowly gone away as app auto patching and stuff like that has been built into Xbox kind of things. But I mean, there's certainly sites out there still, and I would say I don't know if somebody should undertake creating a site like that so they can sort of collect all the things that a lot of the patches and stuff that's needed for run games a lot better. Because I know like File Planet used to do that. There's a lot of those kind of sites, but they kind of went away because there's not a lot of money in that, in hosting old files. So it's just a matter of, there's still some sites dedicated to it. I don't have a good list on hand, unfortunately, but certainly looking out there. And I guess if you're interested in a game, maybe you just search out and see if you can find the file, and then put it on your hard drive. Because a lot of times those patches are 4 or 5 megabytes, which in today's world is very small. So
I also good luck with the Wayback Machine too.
Yeah.
Another couple things. I don't collect old PC stuff, but I do a lot of like retro gaming on my PC. There's a lot of modern resources you can use to get around some of those patches and stuff. Like obviously, sites like Great Old Games or whatever. The more popular ones, they will totally customize and make run, and you just install it so that you can skip the whole process. If you're all familiar with Linux, you can get online and look at the Wine, which is the interface for running Windows programs under Linux. Well, a lot of that, the DOSBox and the Wine forums, they have a lot of like modern user hacks to get those old games to run under Linux and stuff. And a lot of times you won't find them on the big sites, but you'll find patches and things that'll get specific games that people want to play. Expansion packs, that kind of stuff. And so a lot of forum digging on there is what I usually do if I can.
Use Google.
Yeah.
Heavy Gear, how to best run Heavy Gear or something on this type of computer, or put on your Facebook or join a gaming club through Facebook. I'm trying to run this. How do I run it the best?
That's one nice thing with sites like Good Old Games is they're sort of bringing back a lot of the classic PC titles that sort of gotten lost or sort of hard to access for people because they don't really want to go on eBay and get this disc. They don't know if it's going to work or something like that. You can download it and run it, and they'll have it all patched and ready to go, which is really nice for a lot of the classic stuff.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Do you guys ever think about disk rot or circuit board degradation here in like another 15 more years?
That's going to happen.
From some of the older stuff,
Yeah, it's going to become a bigger issue. Obviously, we have a Laserdisc fan here. Preservation is important. It's coming for different systems. It's already here.
Sega CD.
Yeah. And so, it's something to think about. And so it kind of gets back to, you know, I think that there'll be a demand for people to see the physical form of stuff. So I don't really worry if, I have a good example, Outback Joey. I have an Outback Joey card that doesn't work anymore. But it's still valuable and still cool. I'm not going to get rid of it because it doesn't work. The ROM is out there. I'm thankful that that's been preserved. But yeah, it's something to think about. And some of these bigger, yes?
Just a quick comment. I think the fear that this stuff is going to rot fairly quickly, it's way overblown. I mean, I think if you go out there and you find old discs, even magnetic discs or magnetic tapes, like the little, you know, cassette tapes, in most cases they actually work. You might have to fiddle with it a little bit, but you know, as long as it was dry and it didn't bake in the sun or in the car anywhere, I think you'll be amazed that 20 or 30-year-old discs still work. But you know, John is absolutely right.
It's case by case too.
It'll
like
happen.
Mindstormer for Sega Genesis is valuable because all the carts are stopped work. I know the bomb games for 2600, they're all dead. So finding one that works is more valuable. And so it's case by case and depends on system and format, like Astrocade. I'm an Astrocade collector. It sucks sometimes because 1 out of maybe 10 work right. And 2 out of 10 work for a little bit and then freeze up. And so finding a working Astrocade, that's why they're $300 in box. Because you can't, you know, it's hard finding one working anymore. And it's hard working on this old stuff that has proprietary chips that you can't get unless you gut an arcade board. You know, and so it's case by case. Laserdiscs, there's some bit rot going on right now because of how they're manufactured. Other systems, it's the lenses go out, like Sega CD was brought up. A lot of those are going out.
Yeah.
It makes it tough. Turbo Duo, you know, expensive and they go out. So it's like a double whammy. So, you know, these clone systems have gotten popular because it's preserving playing original games on modern TVs, and so that's why I've gotten involved with a couple projects to try to continue to promote the preservation of stuff.
And that is one nice thing about sort of emulators and emulated games is that it sort of originally started out as, you know, piracy basically, but it's sort of in an ironic way helped preserve a lot of games for people who, you know, may not be able to, you know, eventually, you know, that might not work.
And I think too, I think the danger is less, like Hans is saying, it's less age and more temperature. See, I live in a town where the summers on a regular basis get to be about, you'll get multiple weeks where you're 110 to 115 degrees. I'll give you an example, like I love, my first computer was the Atari 8-bit, I still have everything I ever had for it, I've got multiple boxes of discs. The box of discs that I kept inside that had all the games that I played, every single one of those discs still works. I can still fire all of them up and play games. The ones I put out in the garage, I think 1 out of 20 still work because of the heat. So I think if you're concerned, especially I know you were going to be storing stuff, is well, however you store them, keep them in a place where you've got controlled temperature. I think is probably the best thing you can do.
Saran wrap your paper boxes.
Yeah.
That's another thing. It's like old school or duct tape, or I mean, there's different ways. You know, that's an inexpensive way of doing it.
Yeah. Anyone else have a question?
One quick comment. What do you think about the Nintendo Twizzler sale? There was a guy who has about, like, you know, I think he has an eBay listing of like $164,000 for this one of the biggest game collections I've seen out there.
Oh.
Have you seen that one?
Yep.
Just any thoughts on that, or getting out, or is that ever
It always
come to
happens.
you?
It always happens.
Always happens.
But for me personally, nah. Like I said, I kind of have a long-term goal. It's goal to my son, A. And actually, you know, soon to be change the goal and have it for my son and my daughter.
Exactly.
But I'm thinking long-term.
Yeah.
I'm in a position where I don't need the money.
Yeah.
And it's more of like I'm collecting for a museum.
Yeah.
And you know, museum it's not there yet, but yeah, you know, people do it for all the time. Get in, they get out. We have several collectors here at the show that are just downsizing. You know, and that's perfectly fine. It's a gorgeous collection that person has.
Yeah,
And,
just all the wood, the woodwork that he did for all the different shelves.
nice and clean, really
Yes.
nice and clean. I'm sure a reseller's going to get it, and then they're gonna piece it out and you know, keep what they want. And, you know, I'm sure a gaming company will pursue that. Cool. My thoughts. Or someone rich.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yes, son. Okay, that's my 6-year-old son. He's,
And then we were wondering if you were gonna talk about the Ouya at all.
yeah, Ouya. Huge Ouya fan. We're not going to talk about it, but I love it and recommend it for anybody. It's a system that doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's fantastic for indie games. And Pig Squad, who's here, Indie's Pig Squad, that's here, is using it to run some of their games. It's a fantastic system. Totally recommend it.
I'll second that. I've had a ton of fun with mine. Lots of great retro arcade game style stuff for like $1 or $2. It's a really good cheap gaming.
And the Emmys were really great on it, on top of having some wonderful indie stuff on it. So,
Female programmer?
huh?
Female.
The president is female,
President.
yeah. Yeah, she's been in the industry a long time. I don't know her name, but it's wonderful. Yeah. That's it.
Thanks, guys.